Welcome!
This is Running in the 90s.
With a twist.
We're off to the Renaissance Fair.
But not the actual one, because that one got canceled this year.
So, instead, we're going to be introduced to the King of the Hill.
So, today we're going to be talking about the episode Joust Like a Woman. It is a very important King of the Hill episode that tackles women's rights, albeit through a past lens.
And maybe shows how Peggy's a little bit snooty.
Yep, you heard me.
That's just Peggy's character. But I really did enjoy some of the theming of this episode. I think it really talked about what it was like to be a woman back in the year the show came out, which I don't remember. Probably the mid 2000s or early 2000s.
So the show starts out and we're seeing Hank at his job selling propane.
As he does, he sells propane and propane accessories. But Hank gets interrupted in the middle of his sale by his boss, telling him that he has to go to the Renaissance Fair for a potential contract.
Now, Hank is a little skeptical at first. He has no idea what could these people at this fair possibly want with propane.
But he goes anyway because it's his job, and obviously, why wouldn't he?
When Hank arrives at the fair, he still has a lot of questions. They make him change his outfit, they make him talk in a weird way, they won't let him bring his car in because none of that exists in that day and age.
He goes along with it because then again, if Hank is not dedicated to propane, he is not dedicated to anything. He goes through this whole song and dance until he eventually gets to meet the king.
King Philip, who, upon telling him he would need 1,000 gallons of propane a week from Hank, shows him their intention with the propane is to light a fire-breathing dragon, which Hank immediately falls in love with.
That is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen.
And with that deal, he could get the second sink in his bathroom.
So, Hank goes home and proceeds to tell his family all about what he saw at the Renaissance Fair today, and how he thought it was all quote-unquote asinine, except for the dragon, of course.
Boy, they got a dragon that burns 1,000 gallons of propane a week.
He continues with the good news, telling Peggy how with this sale, that they could get the second sink in their bathroom.
That would be paradise. But wait, we agreed I am saving up for the sink with my notary fees.
Well, that should cover the sales tax.
Showing us a little bit of our themes of sexism for this episode.
Peggy at this point just brushes it off as nothing.
So they go to the fair next day and Hank gives money to Luann, his niece, and to his son Bobby to enjoy the fair while he does business.
Who, he specifically points out, Bobby is not allowed to, well, essentially wear anything.
No tights, tassels, or skirts on the boy. Oh, and no bells. Have fun.
So Hank introduces Peggy to King Philip, the customer who he'd be selling propane to.
And Peggy makes a wonderful first impression by saying how almost historically accurate his fair is.
And that his accent is almost right.
And Philip seems to pay it off well for now, but you could tell it actually bothered him a lot.
As much as this show becomes about women's rights, this is a really good example about how Peggy kind of comes off as a know-it-all.
Phil and Hank go to talk business privately, and Hank manages to convince he is a better choice over another fuel company, but there's a catch.
I've got just the hole for this peg.
The catch is that King Philip wants Peggy to be one of his wenches, because it's so hard to find a good wench these days.
And Peggy is quite sturdy.
When she ends up going to Human Resources to find a job for her, the only jobs are
Cleaning wench, stable wench, or butter churning wench.
So Peggy decided to go with the highest ranking wench.
cleaning wench.
Yes. So on Peggy's first day of the job, she kind of gets a little bit of trouble by not only breaking character, but also showing the good old Peggy know-it-all system.
Whom addressed thee?
I addressed myself. Since there was no such thing as a vacuum cleaner in the Middle Ages.
Peggy ends up being accused of being a witch, to which one of her co-wenches defend her and say that she just has a touch bit too much heat on her head. But they're not convinced, and she still ends up getting called a witch.
After that, all the witches go to lunch together.
Which, by the way, they end up getting the last lunch of the day, when all the good food is gone, every day.
And the wenches start talking about how the work conditions are.
Philip is an ass.
Speaking of which, he grabbed mine again this morning.
See Brandon over there? He started here a year ago. Makes twice as much as me.
And Peggy is kind of appalled by this.
Peggy goes to King Philip, telling him how could he possibly have these women working over 40 hours a week with no overtime and only making 70 cents per hour.
King Philip brushes her off yet again.
And tells her that none of those work things she's talked about exist in the year 1590.
So Peggy leaves and decides to plan a revolt.
She at first gets all the other women to join her, despite their reservations.
I can't take any chances. I have a daughter, and she needs a prom dress, and it has to be the one from the magazine or all the other girls make fun of her.
But despite that, Peggy convinces everyone to arm themselves with tomato to help King Philip to start a revolt.
Sadly, it ends up failing, as Peggy ends up being the only one revolting, while the rest of them end up going back to their jobs. And Peggy ends up in the stockades, where tomatoes are thrown at her.
After seeing this, Hank had enough. Seeing his wife get pelted with tomatoes, he decided to step in and say,
Dang it, there are more important things than a sale.
King Philip, feeling full of himself, decides to challenge Hank to a joust. If the king wins, not only does Hank lose the propane deal, but then he is required to clean all of the king's sweaty clothes. But if Hank wins, not only is Peggy freed from the stockade, he'll get the propane contract. No arguments and no complaints.
Hank, I don't need to tell you how important this joust is, do I?
Of course not. My wife's honor is at stake.
Oh, yes, I do. Hank, I already made my in-your-face call to Thatherton.
The joust continues. Despite how confident Hank was, Hank has never ridden a horse before, much less jousted on one.
As I'm sure you guys already know, Hank loses that joust pretty quickly, actually.
But then a masked stranger rides on a black horse and knocks the king off his horse with no problem.
Turns out that masked jouster was Peggy.
As any of you true King of the Hill fans know, Peggy Hill grew up on a ranch. Therefore, she's well equipped at horse riding and the such.
With the King Philip dethroned, all his wenches hit him with a lawsuit.
With OSHA, human rights, everything. And then he finally breaks his accent.
Crap, I'm gonna lose my fare. I don't want to go back to selling real estate.
With that, Peggy and Hank ride off into the sunset. And we end the Renaissance.
That's the episode. How'd you like this episode, Dana?
I have to say I enjoyed it. Honestly, I've never watched King of the Hill that much. Not because I don't think it's a good show, just because I think it came out at a time period when, well, we were still pretty young, and you couldn't really appreciate the humor that they had.
Yeah.
But looking at it as an adult, I definitely understand why it's such a popular show.
I just really enjoyed the episode. King of the Hill has never been afraid to tackle certain big subjects, even if they don't do it in the best way. But I do think that in this scenario, they really did see a problem, try to fix it, and every character that deserved it ended up in a better place. Well, is there anything else you want to add, Dana?
No, I think we're good.
I think we'll catch you next time on Running Through the 90s.
And don't forget to subscribe.
And like.
And comment.
We don't get a lot of comments. Comment. Even the 3 people that watch it every night to be nice to us because you're our friends and family, comment. We want to hear from you the most of all.
So, bye.
Bye.